Where are my Uggs?
Who, what, where, why? Let's look at how you killed that guy. It's Knife to Meet You. Who, what, where, why? Let's look at how you did that crime. It's Knife to Meet You.
Hello, and welcome to Knife to Meet You, the weekly serial killer podcast where our undergraduate degrees are finally utilized. I'm Zoe, and this is Brian.
Oh man, yeah, no, oh for sure. I'm getting all of the use out of my theater and film degree with a minor in education. This
Listen,
is
you
just
learned editing in your film degree, and your
sure did.
editor Brian,
I
and
am at well,
you edit the
with,
podcast.
right. I've got two name tags. I've got one on right now that says co-host Brian, and then when we're done recording, I take it off and put on the editor Brian tag.
And furthermore, it could be argued that your degree in theater is what prepared you to speak publicly, to be such a podcast personality, and to be so good at podcasting.
Oh, well, thank you. It's very kind of you to say. However, I have absolutely nothing kind to say about the man we're talking about today, Zoe.
Oh boy.
Today we're going to be talking about Gilbert Paul Jordan.
Okay, I've never heard of him.
Okay, Gilbert Paul Jordan is a Canadian man who was known as the Boozy Barber.
Oh no, I think I know how he killed people.
Right, yeah, exactly. So,
did you want this ear, or?
Zoe, as I like to do, we're going to go back in time real quick.
Okay, that's my favorite. You know, where are we going?
Zoe, we're going to October 12th, 1987. Clive Barker's Hellraiser continues its box office dominance going into the Halloween season. And would you like to guess? We're all 80s music fans here on the show. I say all of us, meaning the
Duran Duran.
No. All right,
wait.
Oh, hold on. Songs. Let's go with songs, not groups.
Okay, well then, "Hungry Like the Wolf" by Duran Duran.
No.
Like a Prayer.
Ooh, good pick, but no. The actual two that are topping right now at this point in the year are La Bamba and I know the Weird Al version Lasagna by heart, but I don't know La Bamba.
I learned Amish Paradise before I ever learned Gangster Paradise.
Yeah.
And that's like, when you actually learn what the song is really about, that's like really sad.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's quite a serious song. But I was like, I was like 13. I didn't know.
Well, yeah, of course. Listen, Weird Al has introduced many people to wonderful artists through his parodies, and that's one of the reasons why we love him. La Bamba, the other song is "I Want to Dance with Somebody" by Whitney Houston.
Oh, that's such a good one.
Oh yeah, it's like a quintessential wedding song. It's been played at every wedding I've ever been to. It's such a good song. Early in the morning, October 12th, 1987.
Oh, can I just say, I'm sorry, before you get into the serious stuff.
Yeah.
We've traveled back in time quite a few times, Brian, and quite a few times to the 80s, and I'm really upset that the movie that's in theaters has never been Mannequin. Every time we do one of these, and you're like, "I'm going to take you back in time," and it's like 80 something, I'm like, "Is it Mannequin? Is it Mannequin? Is it Mannequin?" And it never is. Or Splash.
Oh, Splash
was that in the 80s, or was that the 90s though?
No, Splash might have been 1990 or 91. Mannequin was actually this same year. It was 1987, but that was a summer release.
Ah, damn.
I know. The next one of these we I'm gonna have to pick a killer that was like discovered around the release of Mannequin or Splash. I'm just gonna have to sneak that in there one of these future episodes.
Mm.
Um, so early in the morning, October 12th, 1987, Vancouver police receive an anonymous phone call with a tip about a dead woman at a room of the Niagara Hotel. Now, uh, I in doing the research for these, I also do if I find something interesting about the area, I try to include that because I think it paints a nice little picture.
Yeah,
Um,
context.
I did find out some interesting stuff about the Niagara Hotel. It was constructed between 1912 and 1913, built under the Chicago School of Architectural Design, has a beautiful red brick edifice, and was designed with business travelers in mind. Hotel was built close to local railway stations and the piers, and it was added to the Canadian Register of Historic Places in 2007, but it was then sold to the Ramada Inn Corporation the next year.
Is it because it's Niagara? I understand that Niagara is probably like a whole region or town or something, but like, are they right near Niagara Falls?
So they are in part of the lake region that feeds into the fall.
Oh, so there's a Niagara Lake. Well, that makes sense. There should be a body of water that's like the Niagara Falls goes into the Niagara Lake. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a lake or a bay or however it's classed, but there's a Niagara body of water that feeds the fall.
Okay.
Now, the original neon fixtures of the hotel are still intact and in working order, and actually, this is one of the coolest things about this. The most information I was able to get about the Niagara Hotel came from blogs that people were running about Hotel Neon, because there's this really interesting community of people that are really interested in original neon fixtures on buildings from like the early 20th century.
When you say neon, you mean like signs that light up?
Yeah, like neon signage.
That's super cool.
Right, and there's these whole communities of people that document and preserve, and in some senses, people will attempt restoration of original fixtures.
Let's not even talk about murder this episode. Let's just talk about how to restore vintage neon signs. Like, let's just talk about and the Niagara Falls, and maybe something about someone going over them in a barrel. I think all we should talk about.
I think that's a great idea for our Patreon content, which you can find at patreon.com/KTMY podcast, listeners. For just $2 a month, you get 2 bonus shows a month. You get the bonus show where me and Zoe talk about whatever the heck we want, and the second bonus show where we do our Patreon Q&A. If you look on the Patreon right now for our patrons, there is a Q&A post where you can post the questions that you specifically want us to answer. Be sure to check that out.
You can also send in your questions to ktmypodcast@gmail.com or through our website at ktmypodcast.com.
That's right. Absolutely right.
Also, you're not limited just to that $2. I mean, if you really like us, you could send in 4.
Or fours of dollars. 4 whole
Fours of, yeah. 4 whole doll hairs.
Yeah, 4 doll hairs. Listen, if you could get us a $4 bill, that would just be super. If you can find a way to...
Did I ever tell you about the time when I was like 16 years old at my very first job working in a movie theater, and some guy tried to pay me with a $2 bill, and I'd never seen one before, and I thought it was fake. Did I ever tell you about that?
No, you've never told me that. I mean, I can understand that, having never seen that. You're like, what are you trying to pull here?
I was like, very funny, sir, but I'll need real money.
I've got...
And he was like, that is real money. I was like, okay, sure. Next, you're going to give me something from a Monopoly set, which you shouldn't do. Then you won't have the money for Monopoly.
No, you have to have the whole... If the box isn't complete, then it just becomes a whole problem.
Mm-hmm.
Organize your board games, folks. It helps.
Well, because I obviously am like, the very younger of a large portion of daughters, so like all of my toys and clothes and stuff were like 90% hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
So like I inherited games, and if it was missing a piece, it was gone forever because it had already been missing for like a decade. So there was no hope.
Well, we could play part cheesy, but there's 3 of us, and we're missing all the blue pegs and 3 of the reds.
Oh man. Okay, so you can send us $4. You can send us however much you want, but the minimum is $2 to get in there and listen to us talk about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we actually just recorded a bonus episode a couple of days ago, our first one, and it was a really fun time. It was nice and lighthearted, and we didn't talk about a serial killer.
We did not. We're never going to put a paywall between you guys and our regular KTMY episodes, so never worry about that. And if you don't really have the money to be giving us $2 a month, that's okay. We will never judge you. You are no less a fan. We still love you.
That's right. You're very special, and
we're so glad that you're just here listening to us. Is really what it is.
Absolutely, 100%.
So. Okay.
So when the police arrive at the Niagara Hotel, they receive this anonymous phone call, and they go to the Niagara Hotel. And what they
I'm sorry, I've already forgotten. What did the phone call say?
Okay, so the police receive an anonymous phone call that there is a dead woman in a room of the Niagara Hotel.
Who the fuck calls in an anonymous, like, there's a dead woman in a hotel? Like,
I don't know. Probably somebody.
Probably the killer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So when they get there, they find the naked body of Vanessa Lee Buckner on the floor of the room. Vanessa was 23 years old.
No, baby.
Vanessa was described as someone who occasionally did sex work and a moderate drinker. However, when investigators examined her, she had a blood alcohol level of 0.91.
Okay, so y'all know that on this podcast, math is not what we specialize in. So you're gonna have to explain to me.
Yeah.
Like what's.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna talk about that. I actually have written here in my notes "forensics break" in all caps with 2 exclamation marks. So we're gonna talk about blood alcohol levels for just a little bit.
Okay, and we're gonna break it down so that it's so easy I could do it, which is saying something, because sometimes sometimes I can't even So all right, okay.
Okay, so blood alcohol content, or BAC, is a measurement that is used to determine how much of your blood is alcohol. And that's a way to determine intoxication as well as alcohol toxicity in the body. So
and for some of you, it's trying to determine how much of your alcohol is blood.
Yeah. Well, in the case of
it's the other way,
Yeah, I get. Yeah, it's like coffee with your sugar. Yeah.
Yeah. You know
Yeah.
what I'm going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not all of them are winners. Some of them are thinkers.
Some are thinkers. Some are funkers.
I'm here and I'm trying. All right, that's what matters.
That's what matters. Now, in Vanessa Buckner's case, she had a blood alcohol level of 0.91, which indicates that just under 1% of her blood was alcohol.
Is that a lot, or?
It's a lot. Now, in a study by the University of Notre Dame, the following standards for blood alcohol concentration were 0.25 and 0.399 being the range for alcohol poisoning in an average adult.
Oh shit! 0.2, and she's at 0.9?
Yes.
Oh no.
So she's like 3 times what it would be considered for alcohol poisoning, and beyond that, beginning at 0.40 is where you are starting to be considered a lethal blood alcohol level.
Oh, so she's like twice the lethal level.
Yes.
Now, that's insane.
Yes. So these are obviously general standards. There are always going to be outliers. It is worth noting that a later study showed that in a case of 175 cases of fatal alcohol poisoning. The mean was about 0.355, which
But
is
that's
less than the
still,
indicated threshold. Yeah, exactly. It's less, which
but
is
it's, yeah. Well, I guess that explains why you mentioned that she was a moderate drinker.
yeah,
Um, but like, even if you were a fucking alcoholic, okay, and you had spent years, let's call it training, to get
right.
your blood alcohol tolerance levels up there, like people who are poisoned with arsenic a little bit over time, and then you give them a big dose but they don't die because they've been building up their tolerance. Is it
Yeah,
like that? Maybe, but even then I think that that would be enough to kill somebody. I mean,
right.
obviously she's dead, so it
Yes.
presumably did kill her, but
Yeah. The highest blood alcohol content recorded was a Bulgarian man
of
who
course
in
it was.
who in 2004 went to the hospital. He walked to the hospital after a car accident and had a blood alcohol content of 1.23%.
My god. Listen,
Miraculously,
I
he
am
did.
half Eastern European, so I can say this. But like in Eastern Europe, it's like an extreme sport.
I'd watch that X Games. Um, so by some miracle, he didn't die from alcohol poisoning. He died from complications related to the crash.
Was he driving? No. Tell me he
Yes.
wasn't driving.
Oh yeah, he
Oh
was
my
driving.
god.
He was driving with a blood alcohol of 1.23. He crashed into something stationary, a stop sign or a light or something.
Well,
Walked to the
thankfully it wasn't
hospital.
another person.
Yeah, walked to the hospital
Uh-huh.
in that state, and then later died. Something happened with related to the crash, but he just went. Like I feel like the alcohol was just driving him at that point. It was just moving him forward. It's like, we got to keep doing this, bud. We got to keep trying.
I think that sometimes when you're like blind drunk, and I of course wouldn't know, because I don't remember any of the times I've been blind drunk. But I think when you don't like feel things when they happen to you, and it's just
Right.
like, oh, is that a piece of like fuselage hanging out of my torso? Cool,
Oh,
like.
not again.
Should probably see somebody about that.
I imagine that there's just like a sentient bottle of vodka like sitting behind his brain with a big steering wheel, being like, "All right, we'll go to the hospital first, but then we're stopping at the Bevmo."
Okay, so
Now, with all of that said, there are many, many things which can determine how a person's body reacts to different types and levels of alcohol consumption. We are not medical professionals in any capacity, but please, if you do drink, drink responsibly. Vanessa Buckner's BAC was extremely high when police found her body, right?
mhm.
I used a blood alcohol content calculator, and using the average height and weight for a Canadian woman at the time, I did a little bit of census research. My
Fancy.
hmm my estimate is that it would have taken her 28 shots of 80 proof alcohol in a 5-hour span to reach that level of intoxication, which is about 2 bottles of Stolichnaya vodka.
Whew.
Yeah,
That's a lot of singing. That's a lot
it's
of singing.
um yeah, no, but it's a lot of vodka.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it
that is.
I mean, and obviously we're going to get into the for more of this. But because she had been known to drink, her death was ruled accidental.
What? No.
Yeah.
You don't accidentally drink over 2 times the uh like lethal dose of like
Yeah, no, because if you're conscious when that's happening, you're gonna throw up.
Mhm.
Like that's what vomiting is for.
Removing toxins from your body.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
But her death was ruled accidental. Apparently, this anonymous phone call didn't seem suspicious to them at all.
I can't even begin. I'm already pretty mad at Canada, but that's all right. All right, we'll let it, we'll be Canadian about it. All right.
Um, yeah. So
So
a month later, November, another woman, a sex worker by the name of Edna Shade, is found dead of alcohol poisoning in another hotel room. At the
this
crime
is
scene,
so bizarre.
yeah. At the
Like,
scene, go ahead.
no, I was just thinking I've never and I've obviously read all about a lot of quite a few serial killers in my time, one might agree.
Yeah.
I've never in my life heard of a serial killer because obviously that's where this is going, because this is Knife to Meet You, the weekly serial killer podcast. In case
Of
you forgot
course.
what you were listening to, so I assume that's where we're going with this. But like, how does one kill somebody with alcohol poisoning? Do you just like inject it straight into their bloodstream? Like that's insane.
Right.
How is
And
this happening?
we will absolutely get into how. Um,
Oh, and I'm not expecting you to answer my question right this moment, but
yeah.
that's
No,
why I'm
no,
thinking
no.
that's
Yeah.
where my brain's at, and
Yeah.
I always like to let you know because I have
Mhm.
absolutely no brain to mouth filter. Um,
And that's why
what's
we love
going
you
on?
so.
Thank you. What's going on up in the old noggin?
The old dome there.
So yeah.
At the crime scene, police find the fingerprints of a man named Gilbert Paul Jordan.
Oh, I love that you said at a crime scene because it seems like they're finally starting to realize that maybe a crime has taken place.
Now, the anonymous call that tipped off investigators to the location of Vanessa Buckner was tracked back to Jordan's room at the Marble Arch Hotel.
Okay, so wait, Vanessa Lee Buckner was the first victim, and that wasn't initially considered to be a crime scene. They ruled her death as accidental, correct?
Yeah.
So I guess now that they've got a second victim, they've recognized that that was an error, and they are now retroactively tracking down the anonymous lead.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? Everyone makes mistakes. I'll forgive you, Canada.
Hold on to that forgiveness.
Uh-oh.
You might not need it later. I do want to note that just because both victims were sex workers, I think it's important to note the hotel, the Marble Arch Hotel, did have its own strip club at the time.
The hotel had its own strip club?
Yes, it had its own hotel. It had its own hotel. It had its own strip club attached to the hotel. It is now, I believe, a ballroom.
Okay. I would like to just, put in a disclaimer here that while strippers are a type of sex worker, they are not the same as sex workers who actually perform sex. Sometimes there's an overlap between the two. There's like a Venn diagram, but strippers are not necessarily all performing sex for work. So just to put that out there, because I felt it needed to be said.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the police bring Jordan in for questioning. He claims in both cases that he was drinking with the deceased women, but knew nothing about their deaths.
Oh, so they both just coincidentally dropped dead of alcohol poisoning after you were drinking with them, and you're the one who called in the anonymous tip to the police to find their bodies, but you know nothing about this? Okay. Have a good one. See ya. Bye.
Yes, that's what happens. They let him go because they don't have any evidence to arrest him on. Apparently, the phone call was not enough.
What?
So they don't arrest him, but they put him under very heavy surveillance.
Okay. All right. Well, that's something.
So he was under surveillance for a little more than a month, and what they found is staggering. In this time, they observed Jordan search out, quote, native Indian women in the Skid Row area of Vancouver, end quote, where he lived and worked as a barber. 4 separate times, they witnessed Jordan pick up a woman, take her to a hotel, and leave her there. Police intervention thankfully saved all of these women before they could die of alcohol poisoning.
How many different women they saved? Four. And they... Okay, after the first one, Brian, that's when you arrest the guy.
I agree.
Oh.
He does eventually get arrested on the fourth one. I do want to take a quick break.
Because you know what they say, the fourth tries the charm.
Right, yes, exactly. I do want to take a quick moment to address, because we've been talking about a man who is killing with alcohol, and his targets are almost exclusively First Nations women in Canada. And I just want to say it would be absolutely impossible for us to unpack the centuries-long stereotyping when it comes to Indigenous and First Nations people and alcohol or alcoholism. Obviously, these prejudices have existed for far longer than anyone listening to this show has been alive. And the goal of the podcast of the show is to educate, entertain, while we tell you about serial killers. It's beyond the scope of this show, and really my ability as a presenter to tell you everything that would be required for a full picture analysis of these things. But I did want to mention a few things specifically before we continue on with our story.
You know, that you say that it's, been going on longer than any of our listeners have been alive. You don't know that. Shout out to our oldest living listener, Ethel. Hey, Ethel, wake up. Hi.
Ethel's turning 702 this month.
I'm sorry, Ethel's short for Methuselah.
As was common in many areas of the Americas and other parts of the world, European colonists and the governments they instituted often meant displacement and forced education for Native children. In Canada, these were called residential schools, and they were put in place by the federal government of Canada in the late 19th century.
I just want to interject here that Canada is not the only one who is doing this. America and Australia were engaging in this as well.
Absolutely. In America, it mostly happened at the state level. Canada is a little bit, and Australia are certainly different in that these were federal programs. So in an article for the Native Social Work Journal, First Nations woman and teacher and social worker Shelley Goforth said, quote, "The high rates of impoverishment, incarceration, suicide, and alcoholism in Canadian Indigenous peoples can be traced back to the abuse received at residential schools," adding, quote, "The roots of addictive behaviors are found in the impacts of this mass psychological trauma and these human rights violations. Unexpressed and unhealed, these impacts have manifested in social disorders. Cultures that have never before seen youth suicide, addictive behaviors, substance abuse, or physical and sexual abuse began a spiral into tragedy."
I'd also like to mention that, they're constantly being victimized. I mean, I just recently was listening to a podcast about, I'm going to say this wrong because I don't 100% remember, but they're called like moonlit rides or moonlit walks or something like that. And basically the premise of it is that police officers would take into custody a Native person, usually a Native man, but not always, drive them out to the middle of nowhere, often leave them without a coat or shoes and make them walk back to civilization. And often they would die out in the cold. And then they'd be like, oh, well, obviously this person died of exposure. And then they wouldn't, investigate the case because they'd be like, oh, well, it's not murder, it's exposure. And then,
wow.
Cut and dried. Yeah. So, like the pervasive hatred of First Nations people in Canada, it still exists today.
Yeah.
In fact, there's at least one other serial killer, I think still active in Canada, who is targeting specifically First Nations women off of a specific highway that, like, now it's become a thing that First Nations women know they can't go on that highway. Like, that's how bad it's gotten. And they still haven't, I don't think they've still caught the guy.
Wow.
The First Nations missing and murdered, particularly of women, is a huge ongoing issue in Canada right now. Not just on that highway, but in general. that they are being targeted, because they are, as we recently discussed in another recording that won't be out for another like 10 episodes, they're considered to be less dead. They are the members of society that the police don't give a shit about investigating.
Right, and you have this overlap between these First Nations people who are already targeted, people with substance abuse problems who are already easy targets for dangerous people, and then sex workers on top of that, which is another vulnerable targeted population. And so it's
I mean, the same moralization that accounts for like 50% of the reason why serial killers target sex workers, ironically accounts for the same reason why police officers don't want to investigate their deaths. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's
absolutely
an
insane.
excellent point. Yeah.
It's what's that MFM quote that I have on that t-shirt that's like, toxic masculinity ruins the party again. Like,
Yeah.
when you have to look at the fact that our not just ours but Canadian police are making these decisions based on the same logic that a serial killer is using to pick his victims, that's when you have a problem. Like,
Right.
maybe don't
Yeah.
use the same logic as serial killers. Just a thought. Just putting
Yeah.
it out there for consideration.
Yeah. Listeners, quick tip. If you're ever sitting around and you're thinking, I wonder what a serial killer would do in this situation, maybe rethink that line. Maybe don't travel down that line of thinking too much.
I mean, as a writer, I write a character who is a serial killer, so
Okay,
I do
well,
have to sit around and think that thought.
That's different.
But I often sit there and think that thought and then think, I don't know, I'm not a serial killer. I have no idea what one would do. So then I just have to make it up and hope it sounds realistic,
Right.
Like,
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah. Dr. Joel Kettner, Canadian epidemiologist and former chief provincial health officer for Manitoba, said in a 2014 interview with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, quote, "In almost all scientific analysis is the social circumstances and conditions, whether experiences with family, community, or at a larger level in society. There's increasing evidence that these are the factors that lead to poor individual health, poor social health, poor community health, and these are what we need to focus our attention on. Those trends are there with other populations, including Caucasian populations, in similar circumstances of disadvantage or poverty or intergenerational experience."
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I just wanted to take a second to highlight that, just because it's
Well, it's really important because even I was taught that Native Americans have a genetic predisposition for alcoholism, which is
right,
not true.
right.
And it's disgusting that I was taught that.
Yeah, like in schools, I can remember being taught in like a social, like a sociology, maybe it was a sociology, like in high school, where they were talking about the issues with like social work on Native reservations and Native nations, and it thinking back is like that. What happened? Well, I know what happened, but the fact that that happened at all is horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at the time knowing enough to like squint at that and be like, because it doesn't sound right to me. I don't know. It didn't make sense how anyone could have a predisposition to alcoholism, just because, like, I don't think humans were like evolutionarily made to drink alcohol. Like, we invented that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seemed weird to me, but then I was like, I don't know everything. So, I dismissed it. And that's really the lesson we should take away from this, is that I know everything and I should always trust myself to know everything. Okay? Thank you. That's really all we need to.
Welcome to her TED Talk.
Obviously, I am kidding. Please continue, though. That was a very important point to make, and I support your having made it.
Well, thank you. Police surveilled Jordan while he was in the hotel rooms with the women he'd picked up. They heard him saying things like this, and these are no order or sequence. This is just a loose collection of quotes. Quote, "Down the hatch, baby. $20 if you drink it right down. See if you're a real woman. Finish that.
Ugh.
Yeah. Finish that drink. Finish that drink. Down the hatch. Hurry. Right down. You get it right down. I'll give you $50 and the $13. I'll give you $50. I told you that. If you finish that, I'll give you $75.
Okay, so this brings us to the KTMY safety tip of the week. If a guy you're with or a girl you're with is trying to cajole you into drinking to the point where they are offering to pay you to drink more, that's a person who wants you incapacitated. And if someone wants you incapacitated, they're looking to do nefarious things. So you need to get the fuck out of there right then.
Absolutely.
Right then.
Yep. Never, don't trust anyone who's paying you to become intoxicated for any reason.
Yeah. Even if you're desperate for money, you're not that desperate. Because that's going to endanger your life. And if you can't get away, I recommend the old oops, I spilled my drink on you trip. Because then they go, to presumably clean themselves off, and then, that's your exit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so drunk and clumsy.
You did that too well. That voice just came out too naturally.
Yeah, well, I'm half white, so I'm very good at it. Where are my Uggs?
Ugh. I would like that.
Oh, God.
So the 4 women who survived Jordan's attempted murder, in my view, were Rosemary Wilson. On November 20th, 1987, she was rescued at the Balmoral Hotel. Her blood alcohol level was 0.52. Verna Chartrand, 1 day later at the Pacific Hotel.
Can you say her name again?
Verna Chartrand.
Verna?
Verna.
Verna. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I'm with you.
Verna Chartrand, the next day at the Pacific Hotel, blood alcohol 0.43.
Oof.
Sheila Joe, 4 days later at the Rainbow Hotel, unknown blood alcohol level. And the final was Mabel Olson. The next day, November 26, 1987, at the Pacific Hotel, her blood alcohol is also unknown. Jordan was apprehended by police while he was in the room in the Pacific Hotel with Mabel Olson. He was pouring vodka down the unconscious woman's throat from a bottle at the time of the arrest.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah. So there's nothing that you can point to say that this guy didn't intentionally kill these women, right? Like, if you're a cop, November 26, 1987, you burst through the door, he has a bottle of vodka down this woman's throat, he's forcing her to drink it while she's unconscious.
That's poison. He's poisoning her.
I absolutely agree with you, Zoe. So he was linked with 6 additional deaths, as shown through the court record. Quote, he sought out approximately 200 women per year for binge drinking episodes covering the period from 1980 to 1988.
Well, hold your Canadian horses. Hold your Mounties. An additional 6 plus the 2 dead women. So that's 8 bodies then that are attributed to him, plus the 4 that survived. Yes. So that's like
we're up to 16 victims. And
can I just say he picked, I mean, I know obviously this is racially motivated. He's picking Native American women and he's killing them in the most racist way he could possibly think of to kill them. Yeah. Other than making them leave their ancestral homeland and marching them to their deaths, which is, apparently how we do it in America.
No, Andrew Jackson already did that. He can't copy.
I genuinely, that's the most fucked up. That's so I'm sorry. Like, I know that we deal with a lot of really, really horrible, like, gory things on this show sometimes. But this is one of those things that's just like so fucked up on like just a like if you think about it level.
Yes,
Like, he may
absolutely.
not be dismembering these women or anything like that. That's like, bloody or anything like that. But just, oh my God, this is the most fucked up thing. One of the most fucked up things I've ever heard of in life, not just even on this show, in life, Brian.
Yeah. And so he was going out and drinking with, according to his estimation, about 200 women a year.
Which is
Uh,
like a woman every day, and then you take off holidays, you know?
right. Yeah. So it's like every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and occasionally Thursdays and Wednesdays. you know.
Ugh.
Um. To quote again from the court record, he was also looking for sexual gratification. Further, Crown provided evidence that Jordan was linked to the deaths of 6 other Indigenous women. The the court record says Aboriginal, but
Well, please understand that Canada and Australia were both under British rule, so
yeah,
they're referring to the same crown.
yeah,
And so, if that's how they refer to the indigenous peoples I mean, technically, I think Aboriginal does mean indigenous in someone's language or something like that, and that's just what they call
okay,
specifically the specific people who live in an area of Australia. Um, but I think that that's also a blanket term. I think there are different tribes of Aboriginal peoples. Like, I don't think there's just one tribe of people called the Aborigines. I could be wrong. I
well,
don't know because
yeah,
I haven't really done a lot of looking into it. I
yeah,
can tell you all about the trading policies of the Trobriand Islanders of Papua New Guinea, but I know nothing about the Aborigines. Other than that, they have their own form of the vampire, which I incidentally found out in writing my master's thesis. Again, helps no one under any circumstance. But I do think that the use of the word Aboriginal in this is a reference to just all Native people.
right. I get that. The word always hits my ear wrong because it seems like one of those. You say indigenous, I know what you mean. You say
Right.
native, I know what you mean. You say First Nations. Aboriginal just makes it sound like other people who were here first, but we are the people who took over. So meh. Like I don't know. It just seems like a cruel, like a word cruel by intention. I don't know. It just always strikes my ear wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I really can't because I don't. It might be one of those things like how the word Eskimo is not like a nice word. That's it means raw meat eater, and it's like it's insulting, and it's what other people called the Inuit, and then everyone just started calling them that, and that was like socially acceptable for like what 30 years or something ridiculous like that. And
Yeah.
then when they started saying, "Hey, it's a really fucked up thing for you guys to call us. Could you maybe call us by our actual name?" And everyone was like, no.
Right.
And it's like I trying to explain to my friends because I have a lot of very hippy dippy friends, and I'm like, hey, the word gypsy is an ethnic slur. Like, that's the N word for Romani people. And they're like, what? And they don't
Because
believe me,
because
and
they're
they
like
continue to do that.
it's in a
Yeah.
Disney movie. It's fine.
Yeah, because
Disney would never
Disney's
do
always
anything
portrayed
horribly
everything. Yeah.
racially insensitive. Yeah.
Yeah. Never.
Never, not once.
I don't know. I feel like with Disney, racial insensitivity is always just around the river bend. But
Well,
um, but no, I think that it might be derogatory, and so if it is, I apologize. We're still learning here. We're trying to, like, it's so difficult because when you get into the struggle of one First Nations peoples, you kind of have to look at it like, hey, almost every other continent has the same problem, and acknowledge that. and and
right.
and it's like there's so much awfulness that we need to learn about, and it's a lot. And I
Yeah.
just overwhelmed myself.
No, it's easy to, because there's so much, and you always want to make sure that we're always attempting compassion, but it's difficult to use the right language and make sure that we're
Well,
uh,
because we're not educated on the right language. We have to seek out that education ourselves, which we have done. We are looking into it. And I just feel like it's one of those things. I might do a Patreon episode about this because I know there's a lot of stuff
yeah.
there that needs to be covered, and it could
I
be
think
its
that
own
would be
episode.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stay tuned for Patreon bonus episodes on uh, First Nations issues from
Yeah,
Zoe.
particularly the First Nations missing and murdered women.
Yeah.
I really, it's one of those things that I've been intending to spotlight. But for a while, I wasn't sure whether or not we were going to do unsolved mysteries on this thing. Obviously, we're not not Robert Stack unsolved mysteries. I just meant mysteries that have not yet been solved.
The unsolved mystery of Robert Stack. What happened to him? Where is he? When will he return my calls?
Um, I think Robert Stack might be dead, babe.
Oh no.
Yeah.
He was old enough when he hosted Unsolved Mysteries, but what a tragedy to lose that voice.
Uh, we're just covering all kinds of tragedies here.
Yeah, I know.
In any case.
Yeah. So similar fact evidence showed Jordan had been with the following women at the times of their death. And so
Wait, are these the other 6 women?
Yes, these are the 6 women.
Okay.
Mary Johnson died November 30th, 1980 at the Aylmer Hotel. Her blood alcohol level was 0.41. Barbara Paul, September 11th, 1981 at the Glenaird Hotel. Her blood alcohol level was 0.41. Mary Johns, July 30th of 1982 at 2503 Kingsway Street, his barber shop.
So he's averaging a body per year at this point.
Yep, so he's got 1 in 80, 181, 1 in 82. Mary John's blood alcohol level was 0.76.
Okay. I'm sorry, what year was Vanessa Lee Buckner?
87.
87?
Yep.
Oh, that
And
checks
so
out. If we start at
was
80 and have 6 before her, then 87's the next one. Okay, all right.
Patricia Thomas, December 15th, 1984, was also killed at his barbershop. Her blood alcohol was
He's not even
0.51.
Sure, I'll murder someone at my fucking place of business. He's not even trying to hide it.
He's done it twice now. Twice in his barbershop.
Oh my god.
Patricia Andrew, June 28th, 1985, also killed at his barbershop. Her blood alcohol level was 0.79.
Fuck me.
And the last is Vera Harry, November 19th, 1986 at the Clifton Hotel. Her blood alcohol was 0.40.
I mean, she's not the last because then after her was Vanessa Lee Buckner and then...
And Edna Shade, and then the 4 he attempted to. Yeah, in the list of 6, I meant.
Yeah. Do we know anything about these eight women? Do we know any survivor facts that could maybe help us humanize them to our listener?
The only information I have about these women is that they were Native women. They were, in most cases, they were sex workers, and almost all of them were had issues with alcohol because he had picked them up at hotel bars or bars near his barber shop. I do not have any other information about them, sadly.
Okay, unfortunately, that information does the opposite of humanizing them, but it shouldn't. I think, at least for all of our female listeners, you've always been in a situation with that's very uncomfortable with a guy like trying to buy you a drink and being a creep. So
yeah, for sure. Sorry, I lost my place.
No, you're fine.
All right, here
I just can't with 8 dead women and 4 who nearly died.
Yeah.
That's, 12 women right there, and it's like, we're in double fucking digits, dickwads. Come on, get it together.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see
So,
if Canada gets it together.
so Jordan was tried in 1988 before a judge. He did not have a jury. So,
That could either be very good or very bad. We don't know yet.
despite the 4 other women the police had observed him with, including Mabel Olson, who they saw with their eyes in the process of being murdered, and the 6 other deaths he was linked with, Jordan was only convicted of manslaughter in the death of Vanessa Lee Buckner.
What?
Yeah.
Nuh-uh.
So six, okay. Vanessa Buckner, Edna Shade, two women that he for sure was with in 1987. The 4 survivors and the 6 women they connected him with, 1 conviction for manslaughter. That's it.
Can I just take a small aside here from the ludicrousness of everything that you just said, because I just noticed something completely unrelated to that. Vanessa Lee Buckner and I'm sorry, what's her name? Shade?
Edna Shade, yeah.
Edna Shade. Sorry, Edna. Those were both in 1987. And you also said that in the police surveillance in which he attempted to murder 4 other women, that police surveillance was for a little over how many months?
It was like 6 weeks.
Oh, wow. So he's escalating very clearly from 1 body per year to 5 in 1 year.
Yeah, even more, because he attempted more, because he had 2 and then he attempted 4 more. So he's attempting to do 6 in 1 year. 4 of them in the span of 6 days.
Yep, I definitely miscounted because math. So, but okay. I wonder what's causing that escalation. I mean, after 7 years of, 1 body per year.
I actually
Maybe it's just 1 body that we know about. That could be.
Well, that's one idea I have. The other is he escalated very quickly after the police interrogated him, because he moved to these in the month they surveilled him.
But they didn't bring him in for questioning until Edna, because they ruled Vanessa Lee Buckner as accidental. So he wouldn't have been questioned about that. They didn't even know it was him who made the anonymous call until Edna died, and then they retroactively realized that it was a crime scene.
Right, but they didn't start surveilling him until after Edna.
Right. So what I'm saying is that Vanessa Lee Buckner and Edna's deaths were so close together that there constitutes an escalation.
You're right.
Unless we are, very, very, like, that's 2 bodies within months of each other, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a month away.
Which is 12 times his normal rate.
You're right. Yeah, and then he's got 4 in the following month, so he's ramping up hard.
Yeah, which is 4 times even more than that.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do 12 times 4 in here, but the point is he's exponentially getting up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wonder what's pushing that. I mean, usually all serial killers, due to their constant need for stimulation, their very shallow experience of emotions, often have to escalate because they don't get the same high and they need more and more and more, and because they just get bored, and also because they're usually narcissists who think that they're never going to be caught, so they think, oh, well, they get emboldened by everything they get away with, and they think, I can get away with anything, so I'm going to now do this,
Right.
Which, I mean, is awful and results in more deaths, but also usually results in the evidence necessary to catch them. But to have 7 solid years with a really specific cool down period, and then to suddenly ramp up to 12 times your normal rate, and then four times that normal rate is, I mean, that's really intense, super intense.
Yeah. But despite all of that you've laid out, that investigators and the court certainly had access to, he was only convicted of manslaughter in the case of Vanessa Buckner, and he was sentenced to 15 years in jail.
Just manslaughter, not voluntary manslaughter, or
Just manslaughter. No.
okay.
Yep. He was sentenced to 15 years, and it was shortened to 9 years on appeal.
Fuck.
Of the appeal, Justice Sam Troy, who issued it, said this. Now, obviously, listeners, I'm going to give Justice Troy the dignity of not speaking in a ridiculous cartoon voice when I read his horrible, horrible quote, but I want you to know that I was very tempted to.
Is it like cartoon villain level terrible?
It's not cartoon villain level terrible. I'm kind of thinking either like Disney Mad Hatter or Snagglepuss, because it's so stupid.
Oh boy. Okay.
Although the appellant has left a trail of 7 victims, the last was the first occasion when persons in authority, in a forceful and realistic manner, brought to the appellant's attention the fact that supplying substantial quantities of liquor to women who were prepared to drink with him was a contributing cause of their deaths for which he might be held criminally responsible.
So this judge thinks that he just didn't know that he was a contributing factor to these women's deaths. They thought that this was all just an accident, and it wasn't until the police let him know, hey, you could be held criminally liable for this.
Yeah, they had to sit him down. They had to sit him down. They had to give him a blanket and a cookie and a hot cocoa and say, now listen, bud, you can't just pour vodka down people's throats. You can't do that. You know what happens? Sometimes when you do that, they die. Do you know that?
It's so clearly like his intention is to kill them. He knows that they're dying. He's the one anonymously calling in the dead bodies, you know? Like what? Oh, wow. Okay. Mm-hmm,
yeah,
mm-hmm,
it's absolutely shameful. So of the 9 years to which he was sentenced, Jordan only served 6. And he was released in 1994.
That is less years than bodies, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh my God, you're right.
Yep.
Ugh.
That is less than a year per woman he killed. Yeah.
Yeah. Holy shit. He was released in 1994 with a 10-year probation, prevented him from leaving Vancouver Island. In the year 2000, he attempted to change his name to Paul Pierce, hoping to exploit a provincial loophole that would not have required a photograph or fingerprints to do so. The loophole was closed very quickly, and he withdrew his application.
You know, this is like when Karla Homolka changed her name. Like, she changed it to something teal. Like, it's not even like a real sounding person's name, but
yeah,
like, you know,
I'm Paul Pierce.
Yeah,
it sounds like a fake secret agent.
Yeah, secret agent man. Yeah. What I just okay. Because it would just be me saying the same things over and over again about how angry I am about this and how much I want to just punch this dude right in his nads.
Yeah.
But please go ahead.
In 2002, he was arrested for drinking and being in the presence of a woman while possessing alcohol, which violated his probation.
Well, I'm glad that at least they put, like, as a, probationary cautionary kind of thing that, like, hey, you can't be around alcohol, definitely can't be around alcohol with other women, Yeah,
absolutely. So he violated his probation. He served the remainder of his sentence in jail, which was 15 months, and was released on parole in 2004.
So, anyone who's anticipating us doing the PCLR on this guy later on in the episode, we're just going to go ahead and just check off violation of conditional release.
Yep. In August of 2004, just a few months after he was released, he was stopped from potentially killing again when Kathy Waddington, a hotel employee and friend of a woman named Barb Berkeley, a woman Jordan was drinking with, called the police because she was concerned about her safety. Barb was quickly taken to the hospital, and Jordan was arrested without further incident. Gilbert Paul Jordan died in jail in the year 2006 at the age of 74.
Of what?
Being old, liver failure, maybe. I don't have any specifics as to what he died.
74 is not that fucking old, my dude.
Well, he'd been drinking for a long portion of his life, so I wouldn't be shocked if it were
Yeah, I guess his
something
liver was
related.
just calling it in by then.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be ironic if he died of the same thing that he was killing other people
I mean,
with? Like, I just love, I really wish that it wouldn't be illegal for us to put in a sound clip of Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove just going, "It's called a cruel irony, Crunk." Like...
One last thing to say about Jordan, to quote him in an interview that he did shortly before he was arrested again in 2004, in regards to his victims, quote, "I didn't give a damn who I was with. I mean, we're all dying sooner or later, whether it's in this bar, across the street, or wherever."
So the mortality of humanity is what makes it okay to start just randomly offing people. First of all, and second of all, he's not randomly offing people. He does care about who he's with because it's exclusively Native American sex workers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, fuck you, bud.
Yeah, 100%. Absolute garbage. Who should not have been allowed out to endanger Barb Berkeley again. I can't. Just absolute. You dropped the ball, Canada. You guys really dropped the ball on this one. I'm not saying we don't, and we do, constantly, but...
Yeah, but that's because we're America. We're not Canada. We don't have our shit together, okay? America is like, we're just out here with a cowboy hat, doing our best, okay? Y'all have, like, healthcare and shit. Get your, come on. We hold you to a higher standard, okay?
That's
because
true.
we see your potential.
Canada, we're not mad, we're disappointed.
Exactly right.
So yeah, that's Gilbert Paul Jordan.
Wow, what a fuckface.
Yeah.
Like, what an absolute canoe just filled with douche. What an absolute douche canoe. Do we know anything about his growing up and childhood and all that?
So as far as his biographical details, we really don't know a whole lot. I do have some other criminal history stuff, which we'll get into in part 2.
Well, it sounds to me like we're just ready for part 2.
I mean, I think we're ready for part 2. Listeners, if part 2...
ready for part 2?
If part 2 isn't for you, well, what the heck are you gonna do? You know what you're going to do, listener? You're going to go to our Twitter at KTMY Pod. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/KTMY Podcast, on Patreon, also at patreon.com/KTMY Podcast, and you can send us an email if you have questions, suggestions, anything you want to talk to or ask us about, KTMYpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. Send in your favorite safety tips. Send us questions for our Patreon Q&A. Send us serial killers that you would like us to feature, Send us money. send us love, send us fan mail.
I love the idea of a whole safety tip episode. I think that could be kind of fun.
Well, we're trying to put safety tips in every episode, but I'm not so great at remembering to do that.
Safety tip spectacular. It's going to happen.
Send us pictures of your dog or cat or hamster, just send us stuff,
Yeah. No pet snakes, though.
We're
no long boys.
I have a friend who has like 8 pet snakes, and he'd be so mad that you just said that. So we're a new podcast, and I just like to know that there's people out there listening. That we're not talking into the great void. Which that's also fun. I like
unless of course you are our listener, the Great Void. In which case, thank you so much for listening to this episode, Great Void.
Yeah. And as Nietzsche would say, as we are looking into you, so you are looking into us.
Spooky.
Hmm.
All
All right,
right.
so let's quick break for part 2.
All right. Welcome to part 2, listeners.
I just want to say that, like, while you guys were listening to real music, over here we were just like doing like I think that was like the Price is Right theme song you were doing, and I was doing like a bizarre rendition of our like intro theme.
Yeah, you were doing like 9 Inch Nails, Knife to Meet You.
Yep. Uh-huh. 9 Inch Knife to Meet You. Anyway,
So many levels.
Right? Anyway, okay. So, take it away, Brian.
All right. Gilbert Paul Jordan was born December 12th, 1931. Lifelong Canadian and independently wealthy. Fun fact.
Fuck him.
Fun fact
Like,
about
there's so much fuck him already happening, and then you're like, oh, by the way, he was also independently wealthy. Like, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
But that
Gilbert,
also explains so much about how his charges were constantly reduced and no one did anything about it, because that's how it works.
Yep. Jordan had received an inheritance from a wealthy family member at a young age and had invested it in the stock market, so he was independently wealthy for most of his adult life. He operated a barber shop as a hobby, and considered it sort of a retirement job.
That's so.
Jordan was a lifelong drinker. He started drinking about the age of 14 and never really stopped, except for the times when he was in prison. So Jordan's criminal record started in 1952 when he was 21 years old. And the list of his crimes, the ones for which he was actually convicted, not the dozen murders he was not convicted of, includes rape, indecent assault, abduction, hit and run, drunk driving, and car theft.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So that's a full 2 on criminal versatility then. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And he was a fucking rape. Oh, I just wish someone had gouged his goddamn eyes out. Okay. Fine. I just particularly hate this guy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. He's absolute trash. He, like I said, he operated his barbershop as a hobby for the most part.
When he wasn't murdering women there.
Well, that was his main hobby. His barbershop was in what was at the time known as the seedier section of Vancouver's Lower East Side. And his alcoholism was so advanced that he claimed he was drinking about 50 ounces of vodka daily, which is about 25 shots.
I've got nothing to say to that.
Yep. In 1976, Jordan was examined by Dr. Tibor Bezzaretti as part of a court proceeding. Dr. Bezzaretti diagnosed Jordan with having antisocial personality, defined by Bezzaretti as, quote, a person whose conduct is maladjusted in terms of social behavior, disregard for the rights of others, which often results in unlawful activities.
So, he's a psychopath. All right. Already diagnosed. Sounds good. That's, by the way, kiddos, that's what they call psychopathy nowadays, is antisocial personality disorder.
That was 1976, so he was like way ahead of it.
Yeah.
But that's really what we know about Gilbert Paul Jordan. He never really spoke much about himself prior. He didn't really like talking to people. He really only gave one interview, and that was the one in which he said it could have been anyone.
No, it couldn't have, because you had to type, fuckface. Oh, God.
Right.
Sorry, guys. Sorry. I know. I'm getting heated, and I just need to...
Yeah. The one last thing that I want to read is, I have a couple of quotes from Vanessa Lee Buckner's father, Nick Basaraba. Quote, He poisons them first and then has sex with them. No parent should have to go through this. He's a worm. He's a lowlife. He should be squashed just as he squashed a lot of girls' lives.
Gotta say, I fucking agree with him.
Yeah. I mean, that the dad loves his kid. Like, so.
Fucking despicable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's Gilbert Paul Jordan. As much as we know about him, we'll go through the PCLR, and I'll keep track of the numbers as is custom. And
Well, I think, it's real easy to say there was no glibber superficial charm there, but he did pick up all of these women at bars, but at the same time he was offering them money, so you don't have to be charming to pick them up at bars if you're just going to pay them to come with you. You know what I mean?
yeah, I agree. If you're already buying them drinks, which he targeted a lot of women who drank,
Mm-hmm.
So you're already providing them with the substance they want, and then you're offering them money to continue doing that. That's not charming.
Yeah. I don't know about the grandiose estimation of self because, we don't have very much information about him as a person,
Yeah.
There's just no information about people who knew him or information about, just kind of who he was on a daily basis. I don't know. We have very few statements from him himself,
The one thing I did find a statement in my notes here that he made during his trial, which I don't necessarily think will go to help this point, but I think it will help us for the rest of these potentially. Quote, sober people wouldn't go out with me, so I didn't have much option. I didn't want to drink in a room all by myself.
All by myself.
Wanna be.
What a fucking... Maybe because, they didn't want you to murder them.
Yeah, no kidding.
I
think worm is actually pretty appropriate for this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just... rapist scum. Anyway, I don't know that we have enough for need for stimulation, pathological lying, cunning, or manipulativeness, but we definitely have a full 2 for lack of remorse or guilt.
Absolutely we do.
I could make it a case for shallow affect because it doesn't sound like this guy experiences normal emotions. He sounds like he's a fucking reptile.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree because, it could have been anybody to him that makes it sound almost inevitable, which is if you think that these people dying is inevitable and it's your causing, that's a level of detachment, I think.
I mean, yeah, but he's also probably lying to save his skin. He's rationalizing what he's done, Like, oh, well, we're all gonna die anyway, So I might as well have murdered all these women,
The Grim Reaper comes for all of us. That's why I have this gun.
For parasitic lifestyle, listen, hear me out. The guy lived off of an inheritance from somebody else.
And then returns from the stock market.
Yeah.
That on bets he wasn't making, probably.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and say, yeah. So what are we up to?
We're at 4 currently.
Poor behavioral controls. I think that's a 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sexual promiscuity. He's a fucking scumbag rapist, but I don't know that that's necessarily about sex so much as it is about power.
Well, the court records did show that he was sexually insatiable. He was, as you may recall from the previous section, they mentioned that he sought out more than 200 women, and while many of them were murdered, and probably many more that we don't know about, in my estimation, he was also seeking them out for sex.
Okay. All right, so there we go. Another 2.
Yep.
So that's, what are we at, 8 now?
8, yes.
Early behavior problem. I think if you're drinking at 14, that constitutes early behavior problem.
I would agree.
So that's 2.
Yep.
Lack of realistic long-term goals. I don't know. He did have that barbershop to fall back on. You know, when you're independently wealthy, you don't have to have realistic long-term goals. So I guess we could put a 0 there. It doesn't really matter, but
yeah,
he definitely didn't have any long-term goals aside from drinking himself to death and murdering women.
Yeah.
But I do think impulsivity and irresponsibility are on there.
For sure.
Failure to accept responsibility for own actions. I'm just going to replay the tape from when he said we're all going to die anyway.
Yeah, big 2.
Uh-huh. So where does that put us at?
We are currently at 14.
Okay. Many short-term marital relationships. I don't think he was ever married.
Never married.
But you can throw down a solid 6 for the last 3 because we already mentioned those.
Right.
Juvenile delinquency, revocation of conditional release, and versatility.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, he is very criminally versatile.
Yeah.
So that puts us at 20, which, as we've mentioned before, is where most people who commit violent crimes end up. However, Dr. Bezzaretti did say he was antisocial personality disorder.
So obviously, we're missing a good 10 points here, and that's probably due to the lack of information. It's very likely that Bezzaretti had info that we don't. Obviously, this is an amateur analysis. We do not have all of the files and information that we would need, nor the degree that we would need. The PhD one would need in order to do a professional and official PCLR. But
as official as it can be because he's dead.
Well, no, you can do a posthumous PCLR. It's just that you need to have interviews with the decedent. You need to have their arrest records, their court records, their parole records, their any psychological records that they have, and you need to do like background research. You need to have statements from people who knew the person, and school records, anything that's relevant. Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff here that, we just don't have access to. So, it is what it is.
Yeah. But that's Gilbert Paul Jordan. Zoe, thank you so much for letting me tell you this story. This was a hard one.
This was a fucked up one.
Yeah.
It wasn't hard in the sense that this was like very gory or anything, but
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, wow. Wow. Just very... okay. Well, thank you so much for telling us that story, Brian. And thank you, listener, for joining us for yet another episode of Knife to Meet You. And we'll catch you next time. We'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat place.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.